taken out of context.
Taken out of context.
Taking things out of context.
Out of context.
Taken out of context.
Taken out of context.
In the context.
We have more context.
Out of context.
Taken out of context.
That is so out of context.
And take shit out of context.
Out of context.
Deeply out of context.
You're taking it out of context.
Now, hey, hold on. So we're gonna flesh this out because I don't want nobody saying we don't take things in context.
Clipped me out of context.
It was out of context.
It's hard for your words to be taken out of context.
The full context.
In a modern day context.
Tell me the context.
Another important reminder as to why context is so important. So,
under the Copyright Act of 1976, I am within my full legal right to share these following clips via photographs, video, audio, and screenshot from the public domain. The following creators allow reshare, download, and redistribution of their content, and as always, I credit them in the description box down below. Fair use, public domain, TikTok, and TikTok Live third-party license allows fair use for the purposes of reaction, commentary, news reporting, entertainment, parody, teaching, research, criticism, scholarship, and comedy. I am within my basic human right, my civil constitutional rights to share under the First Amendment to the Constitution, my thoughts, feelings, critiques, and criticisms, opinions, and expressions. The First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution guarantees my freedom of religion, free speech, free assembly, freedom of the press, and the right to petition the government and air my grievances. The First Amendment does not cover lies that amount to defamation, slander, libel, harassment, threats, targeting, bullying, cybercrimes, doxing, and any other verbal crimes. And the D is fire! Yeah, Ryan Anderson actually posted this last night to his Instagram stories. Proof of fire D. Ha 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 ha. But we're going to delve right in because the Gypsy Rose Blanchard is still in full effect since June 10th of 2015. I want you all to take a listen.
So the one thing that I am leaving behind this year is the need to explain myself and my past, because the fact is no one needs access to my thoughts, my emotions, or my healing. And that is something that I am learning to put in God's hands and let go of what I can't control.
It seemed very clear to me why it would be important for you after all of that, after the act and all of that kind of thing, to tell your story in your own words and really wrest some control over the narrative.
Yeah, it was nice to be able to just kind of like show the good and the bad of me. It's kind of like, yeah, I made some good choices, I made some achievements. It showcased, unfortunately, me going through my divorce and things like that, but that's all real stuff. It's like my life is no longer about prison and, necessarily.
No, it was all about you consenting to hurting, harming, and causing trauma to a lot of other people, including your husband. Spinning fake narratives and fake stories, promising to be an advocate, consensually promising to be an advocate, rebrand after rebrand, reaching out to the Vile Files, Tory spelling. Nobody should believe me, to continuously try and spin that narrative with people you think will placate you, believe you, and listen to you, instead of just answering the real questions that a lot of people still have. Make no mistake, I will prove to you that Gypsy Rose Blanchard has been the one who has monetized and has actively, positively participated and consenting in the Gypsy Rose Blanchard agenda from the moment of her crime on June 10th of 2015 to today, January 30th of 2026. Let me remind you of what she once said. Take a listen.
Have a safer space online for teens, preteens, children. It's like, okay, I have this huge platform. Let me use it for something good. Mm-hmm. And so I want to get into advocacy work. I know I can start working on my advocacy work and bring more awareness to mental health issues. Advocate for prison reform, but also for abuse victims. I feel
Gypsy Rose wants to do with prison reform.
I've been following your case. I can totally help you with that because I had no clue.
Okay.
And I think I figured out the best team that can possibly help people. And I'm happy to introduce you to all of them.
Oh, I would appreciate that. The trauma of my past, it's kind of like everything that I'm going through on a daily basis is my current life. And so I wanted the opportunity to show people like, okay, this is me, who I am today. Love me, hate me. These are my choices. They might not always be right, but they're real.
You can pause and read her comment, but it's also important to note that Dee Dee was never convicted in any court for abuse.
Before I got out of prison, I had asked my then husband, now ex-husband, to create social media for me. So Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. So he had...
Did Nick ever rape you?
No.
And when you guys had sex after your mother's murder, was that consensual?
It started out as consensual, yes.
That right there is a lie that I noticed on October 12th of 2023. And that is why I did my first video speaking about the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case and the fact that she was going to be released from prison. Of course, I had a very unpopular opinion. I don't believe that you should be allowed to commit first-degree premeditated homicide and get out in 10 years. I just don't. I don't care what anybody or one person thinks is the mitigating circumstances. But I have been on TikTok for a very, very long time. And as you know, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, a lot of people did not even hear about her until after December 28th of 2023, January 5th of 2024, and thereafter. And specifically, it wasn't until February, March that a lot of creators that you know and love today, or even some of her friends, have come about in her realm, in her sphere, speaking about her case, talking about the inconsistencies in her stories, things that have been disproven, certain things that have been proven. And I have been here since all of this. I have told everybody, Gypsy Rose Blanchard had an Instagram, a Facebook, and a TikTok. A lot of people think that her friend Rachel Garlick was helping run those. Whether or not she was running support groups, etc., could be one thing. Was she helping her husband Ryan, who was her then husband Ryan, to run some of these pages? It's possible. But I have told you all for over 2 years that Gypsy Rose Blanchard, the accounts that she got over 9 million followers on, those accounts were transferred to her. Because on October 12th of 2023, when Lifetime on their YouTube channel dropped their trailer, and it's still there, you can go see, and I did my first video about this. They dropped a trailer for the prison confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. I noticed a really big lie. And the thing is, the prison confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard were filmed much after Nick's trial. Now, she tried this lie before Nick's trial. She also had to sign an affidavit, paperwork with Nick's attorneys with the court, admitting that she lied, admitting that evidence marker 103 and 104 was consensual sex, not once but twice, and that the sexual encounters she was having with Nicholas Godejohn while in Wisconsin or while in the hotel, because those are other evidence markers, that it was in fact consensual. But yet, years later, in 2022, 2023, when they're filming the prison confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard, she tries to do the same thing that she had already admitted she lied to before. That was such a big, egregious lie to me, and the fact that his trial happens, and then a few years later, she's trying to run that same narrative in the mainstream media again. The sexual encounters she had with her then boyfriend, Nicholas Godejohn, were consensual. They were consensual. That's a fact. So when she tries to word salad and sociopathically confuse and bog you down with, but it started as, but I said, we now know that's not true. I have all 115 videos that were approved by Greene County, and I waited 14 months for them. I got them on December 3rd, 2025. There was a lot of issues with Freedom of Information Act requests of other people's, and it had a whole thing. But now that I cooperated and worked with Greene County, despite and regardless of me not being the one with the issue, and then other issues arising, having gone through all of the videos in December, it just really shows a different picture, because Gypsy is sending twice as many videos as Nick is to her. But a lot of people have said a lot of things about, it's a violation on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, most social medias. You can't make an account in somebody else's name and then transfer that to them. That right there is already a violation of legal practices, community standards, and guidelines. And I think a lot of people didn't believe me. Gypsy is now confirming that. And it's been over 2 years. And I've been telling you, those accounts that she blew up on were accounts that were already in violation. They were already fraudulent because they had already been transferred. They were not made by her, created by her. They were by her husband. And I told everybody this. I was here before she got out of prison. I know what I'm talking about. I looked it up. I was not only on Instagram, on Facebook, on TikTok. TikTok was created in 2000, the later part of 2016. So when I say that I've been on TikTok for over 8 years, I'm not lying. I have. And I'm not talking about the precursor app of Musical.ly that came before it. But I have always told everybody that, that's something that I kind of myself personally, I just overlooked it because Ryan was her legal husband. So if he made these accounts in her name and then she gets out and then he transfers them, 3 months, over 3 months later, transfers them to her, okay, fine. But then we know what she did recently with her friend Bree, how she transferred the account to her friend Bree, how she's trying to say that it was hacked a second time. And so when I say that it was transferred twice, it technically has been transferred 3 times. So her TikTok has been in, huge violation. But of course, everybody wants to take that account down. And I kind of see it differently. Hey, that's her account. It's demonetized. She can't do much with it, but she's got the large following. But the large following equals nothing because the engagement isn't there and the monetization isn't there for her. But as far as that goes, that's really her choice, what she does with that account. We all know she made a second account. We all know it took her not even a week. She got monetized because she reached over 10,000 followers. She reapplied on the new account, which you can do that. A TikTok does allow you to do that. And if she's doing that legally and fairly, then it is what it is. But this is something that I have talked about before because I have been here since 2023. I did my first video on October 12th of 2023. Now I had to re-upload it, not once but twice because I had to censor something out. So of course the date on that was early November. And then I respond to that same video in the comments. I respond to a comment, which you see somebody saying, "You're the first person I've ever seen bring up how she's not so innocent or talking about her case." Because most of the world had no idea. They had heard of her story. They have heard of the act, but they didn't know that Gypsy had social media accounts already made. They didn't know that she had been granted parole. They didn't know that she was soon to be released. It was really late November, early December when media started kind of picking up stories about it, but it wasn't until her release that Lifetime strategically marketed and advertised with mainstream media, not only the release of the Prison Confessions, which aired strategically a week after her release. So that's maximum marketing and advertising, and it's very smart, but she also had an ebook. So they were also advertising and marketing that ebook as well. So when I say that her account had been transferred twice, it was transferred to her. She transferred it to her friend and it had been transferred back. So technically that's 3 times that it's transferred because the original maker of those accounts were Ryan. And then they were transferred to Gypsy. Gypsy transferred one of them, her TikTok specifically, to her friend Bree. And then she took it back from her. So that TikTok account with the large following, that has been in violation. But again, that was her legal husband, that's her friend, and she's giving her access, and she never really fully not had access to it. So when it comes to the technicalities of transferring it, she's Gypsy, when it comes to shit like this, she's conniving. She's smart. She knows exactly what to say. And Bree, you see her friend, especially when she was on a live, people mentioned to her that that's a violation to transfer it. And she quickly starts changing her tune and starts saying, well, I'm her manager. Like, I'm just managing it, like managing the account and whatever. So, you know, it is what it is. But finally, Gypsy Rose Blanchard admits the truth on a podcast that just dropped. And this is a podcast that she has been itching to be on for a long time because she has mentioned it multiple different times. And the reason why is because she thinks it will make her look like a legitimate Munchausen syndrome by proxy survivor. I have a video I'm working on. It's going to take me a while to do this one, but it's going to have some really great information about Munchausen syndrome by proxy. So if you're on my YouTube, stay tuned.
But there was also such a call to action for me to treat it more seriously as a platform to advocate. And so here I am, fresh out of prison, don't even have my own feet on the ground, and people are like, you need to advocate. You need to be basically what you are in a night. And that was a lot of pressure on me. And then mix that with, you know, of course the internet's going to do what the internet's going to do. They're going to build you up and tear you down. So after so many months, I started to see people trying to tear me down. And in the mix of all that, I was also on parole. And so my parole officer had told me that it would probably be in my best interest if I would just stay off social media. It wasn't a direct order. It was a suggestion. And so that's when I deleted the 9 million followers.
She deleted the 9 million follower Instagram. That is actually true. And she's struggled to ever get that back because Instagram don't play like TikTok does. Instagram is a real tool that real celebrities, politicians, and public figures use to market, advertise, do campaign sponsorships, and brand deals, as well as market and advertise their own brands. But the reason why I was counting the things she was saying, because that's how many times she was deflecting away from answering the actual question. That is something we see often with sociopaths. They go in circles, circle jerks. And if they do directly answer a question, it's usually pretty vague. She wants to turn this conversation about advocacy and getting out of prison to all of a sudden the internet hates her and all these creators make horrible content about her lies and inconsistencies. If people gave you a platform of over 9 million followers across planet Earth, all 8 billion people, that's a very small percentage. That's not even a percentage at all, not even a 1% of America's 340 million citizens that follow you. But out of all the people worldwide that follow you and gave you that 9 million follower platform, they gave it to you based on the fact that you said you were a victim. They were taking you at your word, and they thought you were going to do what you said you were going to do, and that was advocate. What you see now, 2 years later, is the result of her not doing that. Sharing her story is advocating, yes, but she's never done it honestly. That's the problem.
A safer space online for teens, preteens, children. It's like, okay, I have this huge platform. Let me use it for something good. Mm-hmm. And so I want to get into advocacy work. I know I can start working on my advocacy work and bring more awareness to mental health issues. Advocate for prison reform, but also for abuse victims. I feel
Gypsy Rose wants to do with prison reform.
I've been following your case. I can totally help you with that because I had no clue.
okay.
Available to you, you know, the way they are on the outside when you were in prison.
Facebook was a thing. TikTok was not.
We all know that TikTok's precursor was Musical.ly, but yes, TikTok launched in September of 2016, and I've been on it since 2017. So yes, Gypsy Rose had her husband Ryan make a TikTok before she was released on December 28th of 2023 in her name, and that is the TikTok that has over 9 million followers on it. I told you, I have told everybody, Gypsy Rose Blanchard had a Facebook and Instagram and a TikTok in her name, in her picture, that somebody created in sometime early October of 2023. She wasn't out of prison yet to do that. So I knew that it was somebody, and I knew that it had to have been her husband because people assumed it was Rachel Garlick. However, she had spoken about this previously, and I would highly suggest you go see her content. Running Facebook groups or support groups or even helping manage those social medias is not the person creating it, though. The person that created it is Ryan, her husband, and they married in the summer of 2022. I've told you guys, I've been here since before Gypsy got released. I watched all of this. I watched every creator, who started making Gypsy content or anti-Gypsy content. I've watched them come out of nowhere because I was here way prior to that. And I did my first video on October 12th of 2023. But she now is honest and confirms what I have been saying to everybody, because I know I looked it up in October of 2023 and I seen it. Not only the Facebook, the Instagram, and the TikTok, because I have long been on all of these platforms.
So before I got out of prison, I had asked my then husband, now ex-husband, to create social media for me. So Facebook, TikTok, Instagram. So he had made these accounts for me. So when I would get out, I would have access to them and already built a small following. So I think right before I got out,
I'm actually flabbergasted that Gypsy Rose has told the truth about something for once. But I told you, she had a Facebook and Instagram and a TikTok in her name in early October of 2023. I told you. I know everybody assumed it was Rachel Garlick or another friend because of the support groups and everything and her friends that were taking part in that. But I'm telling you, I've always told you, and after 2 years, she now confirms this. So it's crazy to me that she's actually telling the truth about something. But yes, she was preparing for this. This was a part of, they knew that she was going to blow up. This is what I call the Gypsy Rose Blanchard agenda. They made these purposely because they knew the Prison Confessions was already filmed and due to air, and her ebook. Everybody knows now that Gypsy Rose Blanchard truly was born with an array of different health issues that are true. She was born over too much premature. She had low birth weight. She was very small. She had microcephaly, which is where the head is anywhere from 10 to 19% smaller in circumference than what it should be, sometimes limiting the growth of the brain, which is very crucial from birth till age 5. She had strabismus of the eye, which if left completely untreated with surgical intervention, does lead to blindness. It is not a simple lazy eye. It is different. She also was in the 5th percentile for height and the 5th percentile for weight, meaning that out of every 100 children of the same age, that she was in the bottom 5 for height and weight, and that explains failure to thrive. Her grandfather even testifies to the fact that when she was born, she had a sleep apnea machine and a heart monitor, and that she really would stop breathing in her sleep. That Dee Dee would have to wake up, he or Dee Dee's mother would have to wake up because she would stop breathing. She really has severe acid reflux, and Gypsy Rose does admit this to Cale Lowry. Severe acid reflux, or GERD, is a reason why people get the feeding tube. It also is a large contributing factor to having enamel issues with your teeth. Did you know that it's estimated over 86% of students who study forensic pathology, when they do their 30 plus days, depending on your state, residency in a morgue, they end up not wanting to become medical examiners based on one thing: the smell of stomach acid. I learned this fact from Dr. G, the medical examiner. Stomach acid is not only that strong and that potent, but if you happen to have acid reflux, GERD, or you just happen to regurgitate a lot, that could really play a huge factor in your teeth. But people often talk about shorter lifespans. Now, microdeletion syndromes can be accompanied with a shorter lifespan. Absolutely, yes. Though many of these people can live into adulthood like their mid-30s and an average middle-aged age, there are some people that have certain microdeletion syndromes like this, the DiGeorge syndrome. They typically do have a shorter lifespan. People with Down syndrome used to have a life expectancy of the age of 29 to 33. But with Western and modern medicine today, they can live until their 60s. In fact, we've seen lots of people with Down syndrome break world records for being the oldest person to have Down syndrome and live. At one point, a man with Downs from Europe had broken a record and lived to be 52, and people have surpassed that now. 1p36 deletion, 18q deletion. These vary. It varies for everybody when it comes to chromosome genetic disorders, whether or not they are going to have a shorter life expectancy. But typically, yes, especially with DiGeorge syndrome, you see that they have a significantly reduced lifespan because of the major heart defects that accompany this specific deletion. There is not enough information on Gypsy's specific microdeletion to know whether or not there's a shorter lifespan, although it does accompany most of these deletions. Symptoms can range from none at all to more significant, such as mild intellectual disability, developmental delays, motor and speech, microcephaly, and congenital heart defects. Complications can include feeding difficulties, scoliosis. Did you know that Gypsy Rose Blanchard really does have scoliosis, seizures, and heart issues? She had a heart monitor when she was born. If left unmanaged, could greatly impact your health. Her mom kept her successfully alive till the age of nearly 24, and the medical treatment very well could have positively impacted her health because they were managing her health with appropriate medical management of specific symptoms, because they can't cure this, they can't fix this. There's no magic pill or treatment for this. Just management of the specific symptoms that that person with her specific microdeletion has. The prognosis for a normal lifespan is generally good, and that could be due to the fact that Dee Dee Blanchard just knew. Her God sense told her that her child had something wrong with it, even though they wouldn't know what that was until 2008, and Gypsy wasn't diagnosed until 2011 when she's nearly 20 years old, because she was born on July 27th of 1991. So for the majority of Gypsy's life with her mother didn't know what she had to know exactly all of these issues she really did have. Feeding difficulties, scoliosis, seizures, heart issues. She also had speech issues, throat issues, swallowing issues, chewing issues, microcephaly. We do not know if Gypsy really has an intellectual disability or a developmental delay. Some people question whether or not she does to some degree. But as far as what we know now, from the time she went to prison for committing her crime to the time she's been released, we don't know if she's actually been tested and if she's gotten a proper diagnosis to know if she has a developmental delay. We also know that this was random for Gypsy because her mother tested negative, and she claims that her father, after she got pregnant and she tested her baby and all of that, she claims her father was tested and that he was negative. A lot of people speculate over the way that Gypsy walks. Her own defense attorney turned manager, Mike Stanfield, said after she got out of prison that she clearly had no issues with walking and that she was fine and she didn't need the feeding tube and all of this. But then in another documentary interview, when she is locked up and they are preparing to go to trial for her before she gets the plea deal, and then there's the whole preparing for Nick's trial, he alludes to the fact that Gypsy Rose Blanchard, their first 4 months after she was incarcerated, she had issues. She barely could walk up and down one flight of stairs, that she could barely walk from, one building to another in the prison, that she could barely walk down a hallway to get to a room where, client attorney privilege, where they can speak. She gets the feeding tube taken out and it's like, oh, she never needed it. I think she really did need it. Clearly, she really did need it. But did she have it longer than necessary? Probably, because in one of the FOIA videos Gypsy Rose Blanchard, you see all of her in her birthday suit. And she's not only not malnourished, she's a very healthy, robust weight. And for somebody who's only 4'11", you know, her small stature is largely due to probably her microdeletion as well. But if her microcephaly is not quite as bad, if it's more at 10% and not 19%, you know, there's a lesser likelihood that she does have a developmental delay in any kind of aspect. You know, I really, in my own opinion, she should have definitely had been tested. Even if she wasn't while in prison, when she got out, she should have been in therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, intensive cognitive behavioral therapy. She should have been certainly seen a psychiatrist to be tested for anything and everything. She certainly, you know, should have made sure that she saw a genetic counselor. And because even if you don't believe, like, I don't believe that her mom did not have Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Clearly, she was really sick. There is no coincidence that all of these things happen to fit this microdeletion and are signs and symptoms of it. And these signs and symptoms in the first 20 years of her life were when they did not have a name or a diagnosis for Gypsy's microdeletion. There's just too much overwhelming medical evidence. But for her own sake, you would think she would want to know everything about herself, medically speaking, and even mentally and emotionally speaking, that she would go and get tested for intellectual disabilities. Because yes, her specific microdeletion very rarely can be linked to autism. But from what we know right now, Gypsy doesn't have autism. And she also wasn't diagnosed with any intellectual disability. So until she actually has something from a real psychiatrist or real thorough testing done, there's no way to say for sure what she does or does not have. The same applies to her life expectancy. You just don't know. But yes, they typically do have shorter lifespans than normal people.
Ready. And what I saw with your story was really no one gave you a choice about whether or not you were ready to take on that position of being this monolithic representation of all survivors of Munchausen by proxy, which is not fair.
Exactly. It wasn't something that I was ready to take on at the time, because I'm still even trying to figure out how a Keurig works. I'm still trying to figure out how to navigate streaming, because back in prison and before that, we had cable.
I'm going to give you one more reason why not to believe Gypsy Rose Blanchard, and why this is just gaslighting 101, manipulation 102, and why this is nothing more than trying to use this legitimate podcast as a means to tell her haters, hey, look at me, I'm not going to post anymore, but I'm legitimate now. Besides the fact that Dee Dee Ann Blanchard did not have Munchausen syndrome by proxy, she was never diagnosed, she was never convicted in a criminal nor a civil court for abuse or neglect on a child or an adult dependent, Gypsy Rose Blanchard gets out of prison and doesn't know how to use a Keurig. First and foremost, friends, Keurig was invented in 1998, and what do you think Gypsy Rose Blanchard and her mother had in their house? Look at all these coffee mugs, all of this unopened strawberry Pediasure, cases and cases and cases. This is at least 7, if not 8. And we know behind the other door, there's a whole nother stack of them. So there's at least about 17 to 18 cases of unopened, unused strawberry Pediasure throughout this house. That's what she claimed she was putting in a bottle, but she didn't know how to use a Keurig, yet they had a Keurig machine. Looking through this mess, it really begs one question. How are you nearly 24 years old and not cleaning your own house? You don't get to say that your mom is a hoarder and that you live in this house with her and it's not your responsibility as a full-grown adult woman to help clean up your own house. But there's actual K-cups throughout this house. Hot cocoa. But she didn't know how to use a Keurig machine? Then why is this one so used? It probably broke. I mean, I've had that happen with my Keurig. I've had to replace my Keurig like every few years because all of a sudden it just has malfunction issues. But the fact that she's trying to say she doesn't even know how to use a Keurig? That's like saying that she didn't know how to use a phone when she got out of prison. Girl, you were using a whole entire phone, social media, and the internet in the commission of your crime. And then you get out and you're trying to paint this narrative like you're just new to the world and you've never had a phone before. No, what you were trying to do was lie about having a phone because you didn't want them to get the data and everything from what you had been doing for years. That's why you lied to investigators about the cell phone, saying you used your mom's, but then you dropped yours when you ran away.
I thought about it long and hard, and the fact is that mainstream media, they want the story and to produce the story and put out the story when it's big and it's hot and it's fresh. No one is going to say, okay, I can see that you're not ready. We'll be back in 2-3 years. Whenever you're ready to talk, we'll be here. That's not what they say. That's not how they present it.
First of all, that's loaded right there because it's not a new story and it's not a new case. In fact, when she got out of prison, her crime had happened 8.5 years prior. It's now been over 10. The only reason why there was renewed interest in the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case and she blew up on social media was because she was granted parole after 8.5 years of her 10-year plea deal sentence for second degree, which she pled guilty to, even though what she did was first degree premeditated homicide. Anybody over the age of 18 who knowingly causes the death of another person after deliberation upon the matter. She tried to take her mother's life twice, a whole year and a year and a half before ever meeting Nick in October of 2012. Was not only because Gypsy Rose Blanchard was getting out of prison, but because all of 2022 and 2023, Lifetime was already filming and completed the filming of a 6-part docuseries, The Prison Confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. That trailer came out on October 12th of 2023, and I noticed a huge lie in that trailer that she had already admitted to being a lie under oath on the stand. Under oath of all the laws of God and man, swore that she was telling the truth, that it was consensual, and then she was still trying to run the narrative that it was not. A whole story about the intimacy between her and Nick after the crime, trying to paint another narrative that she had tried to previously paint, but had to admit in an affidavit was not true. Because the DNA and crime scene marker 103 and 104 prove that. And that's not even talking about Nick's house and the hotel. Nick himself confirms that she tried twice before ever even meeting him, and that Gypsy had told him that she got the idea from another guy. That this guy gave her the idea. I would assume he's meaning Dan Glidewell, but what he probably didn't realize is Gypsy lied to him. It was her idea, but she was trying to blame getting that idea from somebody else. She worked with mainstream media for the money. That's it. It's as simple as that. For the money. As long as she could tell her story and capitalize and monetize and make money off of it, she was all for it. But mainstream media came in years later and was still paying.
But like I said, I am appreciative of all of the media outlets and the producers that have given me a platform to share my story, because I feel like in a sense that helped a lot of people be aware of Munchausen by proxy. But it is kind of like at the expense of me. So that's something that now, 2 years later of being free, getting out of prison, I am knee deep in therapy.
Knee deep in therapy, as you should be. And it's my own opinion, you should be in very intensive cognitive behavioral therapy. Because first and foremost, therapy does nothing if you are not honest. If you are not open, if you are not transparent, and you do not come with the entire truth. But what that does is help you to change the behavior. And that's one thing we have not seen as a result of Gypsy Rose Blanchard and her actions, words, choices, and behaviors is a change in behavior in any way, shape, or form, let alone accountability. And some people focus more on the accountability aspect, others don't. But still telling dumb things like you didn't know how to operate a Keurig machine when you and your mother had more than one of them is proof that you're still not being completely honest. Because you're trying to paint it like you were more sheltered than what you really were. See, it would have been different had there been if there would have been some open honesty, transparency, and the fact that she literally took her mom's life because she wanted to. She admits to that on the stand, that she just wanted to be out from under her control. That's it. That right there is the closest you're ever going to get to knowing the truth or hearing the truth from Gypsy Rose. This story of abuse has been streamlined to not only get her the plea deal, but to get her this notoriety and this infamy. And that is the one thing she is going to latch onto no matter what. And even if you do believe that Gypsy was abused to some level or some degree, still doesn't justify killing your mom, lying about Nicholas Godejohn and your involvement, leaving out not that you ran away once but twice and willingly went back home. But she's appreciative to mainstream media because without it, she wouldn't be who she is. She wouldn't have the social media following, and she wouldn't have a single dime on this abuse story. Keyword story. This is like a case of people who say living my truth or telling my truth. It's not about Gypsy's perspective, her subjective perspective. She's only one of two people that know what really happened, okay? Nick knows from a certain level of things that were told to him. That's his perspective. That's what he subjectively knows, is what he was made to believe, what he was told, what he believed was true based on what he was told. The other person that truly objectively knows what occurred is no longer here. And Gypsy is likely never going to be that open and honest. And that is a disservice to real people who have survived Munchausen syndrome by proxy. Because the money, the infamy, the social media clout, that clouds everybody's judgment. And it really does. We've seen people come out of the woodwork saying that they were a survivor when they in fact were not. And Munchausen syndrome by proxy and Munchausen is not something that's new. People have known about it in the mainstream media for a very long time. There was a mainstream media documentary that aired about several of these cases in 2006 that went worldwide. Even the leading expert on Munchausen and Munchausen syndrome by proxy in factitious disorders has even told some people that claim to be survivors of this that no, they're not. Here's a support group for help. Here's a book for help. Here's ways that you can choose to help yourself if you think or feel that you are, even if you're not. But he also said that Gypsy Rose Blanchard in her case was unprecedented because of the fact that not only do they not have data to prove that this is something other than Munchausen by proxy, to eliminate that. So therefore, coming to the conclusion that it is Munchausen syndrome by proxy is just factually inaccurate and wrong. Because you have to first and foremost have that other party to be able to determine whether or not it's not malingering, that it's not Munchausen, or that it's not just straight up fraud. Gypsy knows what it really is. That's why she responds and answers questions unlike a survivor. She answers them in ways like she's trying to paint herself as one. She wants people to still believe that it's true, that that's what really happened. And even for the people who do believe she was truly abused to some degree, exaggerating and lying about all of these little things does not help people to understand real abuse and what it really looks like. It also does a disservice to real survivors of Munchausen and Munchausen by proxy. Because people that have Munchausen syndrome oftentimes affect well, look at the one case we know of, the Munchausen by internet. Look at what she did to her, I'm not even going to name names. Look what she did to her twin sister. She ended up being a double leg amputee. Ended up losing her career as a ballerina. Ended up, and this is all back in 2014 when all of this happened. Everybody knew about that case. But look at the people that she harmed. Look at the people that were abused around her, in her life and in her family. Look at what happened with all of the doctors and hospitals that were affiliated with her in around her case. It's just, so even when talking about factitious disorders or Munchausen syndrome by proxy, everybody wants to focus on the proxy and this their story and what they lived through. Gypsy exaggerating doesn't paint a narrative of what it really is. She's trying to exaggerate because she now has an excuse for why she got the plea deal and trying to justify and condone what she did. And it doesn't. It's null and void. It's negated. It's just completely eradicated the moment that you don't tell the public the truth. But you want to use mainstream media in exchange for money, for your own benefit. The least you can do is do exactly what you said and advocate and bring awareness. Now, sharing your story should have been doing that, but only if it was done in an honest and truthful way. Like failing to mention in all of the Gypsy Rose agenda, every single documentary, every single interview and podcast that she's done, and she lied to everybody about the act. The act is the one and only dramatized series that has been done about her case. And do you know that they wrote that script based off of what Gypsy Rose has said and done in over 4 previous documentaries, interviews, or sit-downs? They scripted that dramatized series based on what Gypsy said. She doesn't like it because she knows it's not the truth, and it portrays her in this way. But that's what you said happened. That's what you said your life was like. That's what you said on a documentary, another documentary, a sit-down, and another interview. But she tells everybody that she didn't get paid life rights, and she didn't get paid when her prison emails came out. We know that that's not true. She allegedly got paid over $50,000, $30,000 and another $20,000 after the new year or whatever it was. And 1980 Millennials commentates she knows the emails inside and out a lot better. It's a very difficult document to read first and foremost because there's over 1,000 pages. But there's not a single documentary, interview, sit down that has not been done by Gypsy with Gypsy's help and involvement. And there's not a single one that hasn't been done that has been just objective without her, without paying her. And when you pay somebody large or small amount of money, that is a huge motive and incentive to lie, to exaggerate, to not tell the truth. And that's what we have seen the result of, unfortunately. And the reason why she's so appreciative of the mainstream media outlets, the networks and the producers that gave her a platform, because they are the ones who gave her what she has today. They are the ones who gave her this story, that gave this story her name and image attached to it. They are the ones who gave her lots of money. They are the ones who got her the social media clout by strategically aligning something that they had been working on for 2 years to perfectly, marketing and advertisement wise, come out exactly 1 week after her release from prison, as well as the ebook. That was to monetize and capitalize off of that story. But Gypsy is the one that's seeing the benefit of that, as well as the people who split it with her, because they're the ones who did the hard work of putting all of this together and doing the actual work, doing the writing, the scripting, the filming, the editing, and brokering these mainstream media deals. She also fails to mention how much money she's made from TMZ. But she knows she would be nothing without them.
You know, strange dinner party conversation of like, what do you do for a living? And I decide to answer that question honestly, instead of just being like, oh, I'm a writer and stuff. But, you know, when I tell people that, and then the minute I say Munchausen by proxy, I mean almost everyone. It's like, oh, yeah, the Gypsy Rose Blanchard case, right? And obviously that has, it's fraught because there were, you know, some very sensationalized versions of your story that we can kind of talk about. And I'd love to know kind of how you feel about some of the ways in which your story has been represented and misrepresented. And I also know that you didn't choose to be the face of this, and that was not an active choice on your behalf to bring it out of the shadows. And so I just want to recognize that I see where that has come at the cost of your well-being, safety, mental health, and I'm sorry that it had to be that way. And just know that, like, within my community of people, the professionals who've been working on it for decades that I've been so lucky to connect with, the survivors, the people that listen to the show, very much rooting for you.
Thank you.
Obviously, your story has been the subject of, you know, in addition to sort of the tabloid gossip and the sort of, writing about you and every single thing you're doing in your romantic relationships and et cetera, has been has been the subject of a couple of really, substantive documentaries and dramatization, the act. And I think it has led to this idea that you personally have somehow cashed in this big way on the events that happened to your life. And I don't think that perception is in line with reality. And you have been involved or not involved in some of these projects directly. Some of these projects happened, to my understanding, without your involvement or even your consent. So can you talk a little bit about how you were involved with some of these projects and just sort of like what people may not understand about what it is to be a person who is famous in the context of being, the victim and an accessory to a crime?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of...
She's not an accessory to a crime. She is the sole perpetrator of the crime. Nick is her co-conspirator, her accessory to her crime. Gypsy Rose, by the definition of first-degree premeditated homicide in the state of Missouri, the legal standard, that's what she did. Anybody over the age of 18 who knowingly causes the death of another person after deliberation upon the matter. She did that shit. She tried to take her mother's life twice in 2011. She doesn't meet Nick until October of 2012, where she proceeds to spend over 2 years and 8 months manipulating him into believing the only way she could be with him is if he helps her because she's too scared and too squeamish to do it herself. That she loves him, and the only way that they could be together is if her mom is out of the picture, if her mom is gone. It's the only way Gypsy's going to be free to be with Nick. She convinced him of that. That's his perception. That's what he thought. That's what he knew and believed to be true. And on top of the mitigating circumstance of him being autistic, having believed that they exhausted all of these other options and there was the last option left based on Gypsy's plan, the crime would never have happened if it wasn't for her. And that is the largest statement, truthful statement, factual statement out of the whole Gypsy Rose Blanchard case. It would not have happened if it wasn't for her. Because even if it wasn't Nick, she was going to find somebody else to help her. That's why she psychologically latched onto Amelia Bird, because she did the same exact shit.
Hello, welcome to my channel, Straight Out of Context. I'm Barbara. If you do not know who this is Gypsy Rose Blanchard. She was arrested on June 15th of 2015 for the premeditated first-degree murder of her mother. A lot of people don't know that in the spring of 2011, she tried to unalive her mom. She tried a second time again on June 14th of 2011. And then she spent almost 3 years manipulating her inner boyfriend, Nicholas Overtime, into helping her finally get the job done. You know what they say? Third time's a charm. Well, Gypsy and Nick were arrested at Nick's mother and stepfather's house on June 15th of 2015. Another fact a lot of people don't know is that 7 months after she was arrested, they already began filming for the first of many docuseries, documentaries, shows, or books that Gypsy Rose would take part in, and that began with HBO's Mommy Dead and Dangerous. And this was set to premiere on March 11th of 2017. However, it did air later at May 15th, 2017. November 22nd of 2017, Dr. Phil did an exclusive interview with Gypsy Rose Blanchard while she was serving her time. After everybody heard this interview, this is where Gypsy quoted saying that her mother taught her to be a liar, a great liar, one without any conscience. November 6th of 2018, Lightbox filmed this documentary called Gypsy's Revenge. March 20th of 2019, Hulu did a dramatization series based on Gypsy Rose Blanchard's life and crime called The Act, of which Patricia Arquette and Joey King played both the mother and daughter duo. On January 21st of 2021, Killer Cases did this episode called Killing Mama about Gypsy Rose Blanchard. December 28th of 2023, Gypsy Rose Blanchard was granted parole and she was released. A week later, on January 5th, 2024, Lifetime, who had filmed this for a year and a half prior to the air date, aired this. The prison confessions of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. On January 5th of 2024, Gypsy Rose Blanchard and her husband, Ryan Anderson, were not only allowed to leave the state, they were allowed to go to a whole different state and city, and this is where she appeared on the ABC show called The View. January 5th of 2024, Gypsy Rose changes her clothes and she also does an interview for Entertainment Tonight, but this time she has her husband, Ryan Anderson, on camera with her. This very clearly is a strategic PR tour. January 8th of 2024, Gypsy Rose Blanchard and her husband, Ryan, go on the Vial Files. January 9th of 2024, Ben Bella Fox releases this, Released, Conversations on the Eve of Freedom by Gypsy Rose Blanchard. However, the two ghostwriters that really wrote this book are Melissa Moore and her literary agent. In March of 2024, Gypsy Rose Blanchard publicly announces that she left her husband, Ryan Anderson, and she signed a divorce. May 3rd of 2024, Gypsy Rose Blanchard is on The View again. However, she's interviewed from a red carpet appearance because she was not in studio. January 26th of 2024, ABC's show 2020 did an episode about Gypsy Rose Blanchard entitled The Next Act. However, they updated this and they reran it 2 more times, again in May and August of 2024. June 3rd of 2024, Gypsy Rose Blanchard gets her reality show post-release with Lifetime called Gypsy Rose Life After Lockup. June 5th of 2024, Chris Jericho actually releases an interview that he had with Gypsy Rose Blanchard and her husband Ryan Anderson. Now, if you pay close attention, you can see this must have been filmed months before she and Ryan actually separated. Because that same day on June 5th, 2024, Ryan Anderson goes on Extra TV where he does this interview and he's talking about exactly that. October 16th of 2024, Gypsy Rose Blanchard reaches out to the Wild Files where she goes on and does another interview with him, but this time she doesn't have her husband Ryan Anderson, she has her ex-fiancé Ken Herger with her, where she's already very pregnant with his child. They go on to discuss everything that has transpired since Gypsy has been released and future plans. December 10th, 2024, this is going to be released by Ben Bella Fox, Gypsy Rose Blanchard, My Time to Stand, a memoir. Now, Melissa Moore and her literary agent are actually the two ghostwriters on this, as well as her other book. The difference here is that there's going to be several versions of this, including you can get a hardback copy or you can get an audiobook copy where Gypsy Rose Blanchard herself narrates. strategic work of Melissa Moore. And if you do not know who she is the daughter of the infamous serial killer dubbed the Smiley Face Killer. Gypsy's defense attorney / now manager,
Now
Mike
not
Stansfield.
manager.
Her father, Rod Blanchard, and her stepmother, Christy Blanchard. As you can see from the very beginning, they are proud to be standing in front of any of these shows and documentaries and appearing and doing just that, taking pictures, promoting these shows, docuseries, books, reality shows, all of it. But the biggest way for Gypsy Rose Blanchard to promote, market, advertise her own shows, docuseries, reality show, and books is by going to social media, which is precisely what landed her in trouble to begin with.
Now, of course, we know that the Gypsy Rose Blanchard agenda is still in effect, even today. Gypsy Rose had her second season of her reality show, Life After Lockup with Lifetime, which is owned by the A&E network. They aired that beginning in March of 2025, but they didn't renew her for a third season. In fact, she was too much of a liability, and she negated and voided her contract when she broke her NDA to speak to TMZ as a direct source and get paid by TMZ to run stories about her. But we see in June of 2025, she goes on a 2-part podcast with Tori Spelling on her podcast, Misspelling, where she answers the same, very similar questions as she's doing today. And she confirms, just like the Vio Files, that Gypsy Rose reached out to her. And then today we have the podcast Nobody Should Believe Me podcast. And they just aired their episode of the podcast with Gypsy Rose Blanchard, where she admits that Gypsy Rose reached out to her. We also know that Gypsy Rose doesn't have a business manager, and she stopped working with Red Banyan, the PR company, a long time ago. And that's because Gypsy Rose Blanchard is a legal liability. She not only doesn't adhere to her contracts or her NDA, or even a lot of her contractual agreements, but the legal liability of the backlash and the negativity of a lot of the lies that are caught in these podcasts, in these series, in these documentaries, etc., especially in compared to the same questions she was asked in older ones. That's the reason why Gypsy Rose has faced backlash at all, is because she herself has participated in all of these, except for The Act, which of course was a dramatized series done by actors. It was a stage, it was a studio, it was scripted. But it was scripted based off of what Gypsy Rose Blanchard was then claiming happened in her life with her and her mom. What she claimed it looked like. That was why it was scripted the way it was scripted. And she also, by the prison emails, got paid $50,000 by The Act. Now, on the Tori Spelling podcast, she lies and says that they never paid her life rights. But the prison emails proves that to be incorrect and a fabricated lie. Gypsy Rose Blanchard is the only one participating in these.
And so for me, social media was something fun. Like, it was something that I got to do TikTok dance.
But you've admitted that you can't dance. So it wasn't ever anything other than marketing and advertising. And with the strategic alignment of your release in a week later an ebook and the Prison Confessions docuseries, which is 6 episodes, 1 hour long episodes, that's 6 hours. Coming out on January 5th of 2024, you knew exactly what was going to happen. You knew that you were going to promote all of your projects that you actively participated in, and you knew that those projects were going to help get you a lot of following on whatever social media you were on. So, in another little clip, she talks about how she became a public figure without her consent. That's a lie. I debunk and expose all of that in the Gypsy Rose Blanchard agenda. I did that back in 2024. I've updated it in 2025. She also even did this, where she went to San Francisco State University in October of 2024 while she was still pregnant. And she did an entire speech about being in prison, talking about victim / perpetrator of a very heinous crime, prison reform. She mentions She mentions the Menendez brothers. And then when she's on a flight back home and calls TMZ to the airport to come and talk to her and get the video footage so she can get paid, they ask her about the Menendez brothers and she's like, I don't want to speak on that. Then why the hell did you mention them in this speech then? Because they were getting a lot more attention than you. And they always will get more attention than you. They could be locked up for 35 years and they literally will get more attention than you ever will combined. But they've also both admitted what they did. They've both publicly admitted that they've lied about a lot of things. And they put out those statements. I have posted them. I have posted them on my community post. What they said in their own words, apologizing profusely for what they've done. They've also served over, 3.5 decades? Both Eric and Lyle admit to lying. A lot of lying. Even up to not even 5 years ago, still lying to mainstream media about their parents, their crime, the reason why, all of it. But she got a lot of backlash for this because she wasn't being truthful or honest about what really happened in that house. And a lot of her earlier words can be used to debunk and expose what she said as not truthful. She's also the one who promised to be an advocate. One of her very first TikToks was trying to explain what Munchausen syndrome by proxy was because she had to read it from a pamphlet. That's how much she didn't live that experience. She's constantly trying to rebrand her image as an advocate.
5. Keep making content.
Let me know what you think down in the comments section. I hope you all have a fantastic week and weekend. And if you liked my video, don't forget to subscribe, like, turn on notifications, and share.